welcome to the You Got It Girl podcast. Today we have Vannary Kong here with us. She is the co-founder of The World Is Watching.
Yes, hi Nancy, thank you so much for having me. So I am one of the co-founders of The World Is Watching. It kind of got birth because a colleague of mine started seeing a lot of the police brutality that was not only in the United States but other countries. And in my current work, I'm actually in global governance through the Department of State and White House initiatives. So we started getting contacted a lot by our friends overseas that were facing a lot of the same things. So we wanted to create an international coalition by empowering youth voices to more so get involved with how to hold people, especially governments and law enforcement, accountable for a lot of the police brutality that's happening against people of color. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're organizations to kind of get more voices at the table on promoting justice and human rights.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in DC? I know you're currently you're studying at Harvard University, you're working in DC. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm actually studying cybersecurity and public policy. My particular goal is I want to be the U.S. ambassador, particularly in the Southeast Asian region, the Pacific Islands. That's my regional focus. And currently, right now, I'm working with a lot of South Asian groups in a lot of the international affairs region to figure out how to create infrastructure building and protect the technology so countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos can catch up on the global scale of things of, keeping up with digital diplomacy and things like that.
Their lack of technology, depending on where you go, especially in like the really rural areas, because I think like with us being in the United States, we're just so used to technology. They're like little kids, like toddlers with like iPads and stuff. So like when you go to a third world country, you see like how far behind they are. It's kind of crazy. So I think it's great what you're doing with your organization.
Yes, and I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because my mom's actually from Cambodia. When I actually went to go visit my family, I'm sure it's kind of replicating in Vietnam too. A lot of girls, unfortunately, don't get a chance to go to school because they have to stay at home and take care of kids. So I've actually even worked with Unite 2030, and they created these social entrepreneurship projects to bring cell phones, which has lesson plans and schooling, to girls back in Vietnam and Cambodia to get them, when they have time outside of doing housework and keeping up with the culture norms, to actually receive an education, which is why I was passionate about bringing the cybersecurity space into the developing nations.
Awesome. So how did you kind of get into this? Can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of, what kind of inspired you to go down this path?
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. So my mom and my entire family are actually refugees from Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge War. So they came to the United States in 1981, and my father is actually African American. So, and I'm actually from the Midwest in Indiana. So growing up, having an African American father and like a refugee mother, I don't want to call it trapped in two worlds, but I got the best and the worst of living in both worlds, seeing how there wasn't a lot of resources for Southeast Asians that are resettling within the U.S. And, and I know personally, my grandfather actually worked for the American Embassy under Long Nol, who was appointed by the United States government at the time during the Cold War. So growing up, when unfortunately, after my parents' divorce, my grandpa was taking care of me, but he also taught me about foreign relations, international affairs, things like that at a really young age, and talked about the importance of going to school and trying to go back. And he taught me about Southeast Asian economics. So from there, that's kind of where it was birthed, and that's when he would talk to me about the United Nations. And then when genocides happened, the International Courts of Justice and the war tribunals. And so then, like, growing up, I knew when I went to undergrad at Indiana University, I knew that I wanted to work at within this realm. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of people of color that go into foreign policy, especially women, because the Department of State actually came out with the Government Accountability Report saying that women and minorities, the rates are as low as they were before during the times of segregation. So right now, just bringing that women's empowerment into this space, and with the recruitment initiatives, that's what kind of led me into going into this space. So I went to Indiana University. Unfortunately, being one of the first from your state to kind of break into this global field, I didn't receive a whole lot of support, and unfortunately there was a time where I came out of homelessness, but I became the first student at Indiana University to intern at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Once I graduated, I networked with the right people, got a recommendation letter for Harvard's Kennedy program and the extension program within cybersecurity. And I ended up getting a fellowship out in Washington, D.C. So I currently work for a government contractor for the Department of Defense. And I'm one of the only few women in my office, especially Asian American and African American as well. So that's kind of what led me out here.
You had mentioned that you did some work with the United Nations. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your experience? What was it like?
Yeah, so actually last year, the White House actually appointed me to represent the U.S. In the G20 Youth Summit in Tokyo, Japan. So we got to meet with Prime Minister Abe and work really close with the Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I advocated for intellectual property protection, which basically means, if you have a business and you have a blueprint, that other countries can't come in and copy your work, but I'm not going to name any countries in particular that's known for doing this, and replicating it and stealing money and revenue. So that's what I advocated for trade purposes. And then from there, I actually got to go speak at the United Nations alongside with Japan, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, and bringing that youth voice and that women's empowerment voice that the UN actually advocates for at the government decision-making level, to make sure that it's not just male-dominated. So that's one of the projects that I worked on. Yeah, so then recently, actually this year, the United States was in charge of hosting the G7 summit. And the G7 summit more so focuses on the financial markets. This year, it was supposed to be in person due to COVID-19. And it was actually held virtually. So this year, the White House actually charged the Young Professionals in Foreign Policy to host it. So I was in charge of global connectivity and trade. So my role as a Sherpa. So a Sherpa, basically, we have Sherpas at the White House too. They're basically handle the negotiations with other countries. Anything when it comes to economics, immigration, it depends on whatever the agenda is that year. So the G7 countries are United Kingdom, Canada, the US, Japan, Italy, Germany, and the European Union. It used to be G8, but President Obama kicked Russia out after some human rights issues. So yeah, this year what I ended up having to do was all the countries sent all their trade proposals to me. And because the G7 countries are all completely different, I had to actually negotiate it and handle it out and turn it up. And basically the end result had to be 2 pages within the communique. Due to George Floyd dying, however, with the law enforcement, the G7 countries actually all came together and came out with the Black Lives Matter movement resolution that was also submitted to the White House, as long as our counterparts in the other countries. So that's also what led to The World is Watching being born, because you had all these representatives that were chosen by their government saying, hey, these are issues that we're also facing in our countries. We need to do something about it. And it was also great, obviously, having women at the table as well. After the communique was published, after we presented it to the White House and the Sherpas in the European Union, then that's when the communique actually came into influence policy. So something that I particularly came to do was I actually reached out to the World Bank and to the WTO and figuring out what can we do as women from the Southeast, that are descendants from the Southeast Asian nation, to improve trade policies in the crisis that we're going through right now, especially during COVID. Because as you know, having the Cambodian Vietnam ancestry like you and I both have, we actually want to give back to being back home. So I know for me, it was really important to make sure we include that infrastructure building and making the women's voice heard, because women don't get a lot of opportunities back home. And that's something that I wanted to do personally, was give back while staying true to myself. And something that I personally try to combat too, being in the role in foreign policy, I mean, like you, Nancy, I love fashion. I love makeup. I don't feel like anyone should have, I do agree that you have to be professional, but I love color. So something that I personally wanted to do was to create more partnerships between the public sector, like government, non-for-profit, and the private sector, such as fashion, finance. What can we do to bridge those gaps and to make it more comprehensible for everyone to understand that each of us have a role to play to making the world a better place?
We're going to go ahead and start Girl Talk now. So what is your fashion go-to?
So I do have friends that are in the fashion industry. So if I'm going to one of their events to support them, because I love having networks outside of what I do, I typically tend to go to satin pants, and I love a burnt
Ooh.
orange color, and they're silk, and I tend to do like a black top and like a bold lip, and then a very neutral cat eye with lashes and everything. And then I tend to, if I'm wearing a necklace, I'll just go with a simple pearl. And let's see, if I'm going to an event like, if I'm going to an event like something on Capitol Hill, what I typically tend to wear is a high waist pant, a very like sleek cut crease on the pants and trousers. The ones that I wear are pink because I like color. And then I tend to do like a white blazer with a silk chiffon, like off-white top. And normally, because I have really thick curly hair, so normally I'm just putting it up in a bun because it gets hot being on the subway. So normally I'm just putting it up in the top, and then I have like a work bag, but it's something I put my laptop in. But normally that's like nude or like a nautical color, and then normally I'm wearing like nude stilettos.
Okay, beauty must-haves. I know you mentioned you love a statement lip color.
Yes, I do. So a must-have, a very good toner and a good serum, because you have to have a good base before you actually start putting on good makeup and a good foundation. And you have to make sure your primer and your foundation are equally matched. You can't have like one that's based off of silicone and I actually read the ingredients. So you know, you don't want to so you don't want to make sure that your foundation is like melting off your face, you know. And then for me, I always want a good finishing spray, and I'm a big believer in banana powder too, like baking your face, covering up the bags on your eyes, especially if you're like working women like ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in being very polished. And then for me, if I'm wearing my hair naturally curly versus straight, I always believe in having a good conditioner, hair conditioner, to kind of making sure that your curls are perfect. So something that I've been using recently is Maui. And I love tropical scents because I just feel like it adds an extra oomph to your day. So that's something that I personally believe in. Awesome. But I'm also learning how to use like natural foods into your skincare routine. So my friend, she's half Jamaican, half Chinese too, but she was telling me about using rice water to in your hair because it helps grow your hair back, and it like prevents shedding. So that's one way. Just like I like, you know, investing more time into your physical appearance. But then for me, I'm a really big believer in books. I'm reading this book by Chris Voss, and it talks about never split the difference. It's called Never Split the Difference, Negotiate as if your life depends on it. So incorporating like advocating for what you want and what you deserve, especially within the workplace with salaries and benefits.
Okay, what are your foodie cravings?
My foodie cravings.
Any restaurants in particular, or like certain type of food?
Yes. So because I'm far away from my mom, I think I'm always craving Asian food. So in Vietnam, you guys call it banh xeo, but in Cambodia we call it banh chao. And so I love like a crayfish. I'm always like craving it, and I feel like whenever I make it, I don't make it as good as like the restaurants or my mom. So nothing tastes as good as being at home. I don't want to say pho because it's just like everyone eats it now.
Dude, I love pho. I have it like once a week.
Yeah, and then I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's like a bum bao hui. That's something that I'm always like craving. So I know it's a Vietnamese dish. I just never know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. But I love going to like the mom and pop shops. Or like going to like the Korean dessert places too. And then sometimes like I do miss having like food from my dad's side family. So like my boyfriend and I will always try to go to like a soul food restaurant, you know, to support local businesses as well. So
yes, for sure. Yes, I love like mom and pop shops. Like it's usually like the hole in a wall type stuff. Like have the best food too.
You got it, girl.